Hey, today we're going to be reviewing a few viewer-submitted weapons and what makes them good or bad, alongside how to use them and potential improvements to them. These first 3 episodes of Season 2 will be redoing episodes 10 and 12 of the original run of Weapon Review, but after that, it's all new. If you want to submit a weapon for review, the link is in the description. No point in wasting any more time. Let's just get right into it. First is this thing. I didn't know what to call it last time, and I still don't know what to call it. Its primary strength is the Phantom Guarded Greatsword on one end, which, if you've seen my damage value video, you'll know is absolutely amazing if you have the health to survive the self-damage. The other main strength is the wide dagger on the other end. While it doesn't do anywhere near as much damage as the Greatsword, it's a fantastic choice for a general utility tool. And when it comes to fighting low-health enemies like Spriggles that aren't worth the self-damage of the Phantom Guard, it's a great choice. It has a few weaknesses, however. First is weight. If you're not using Mithril for all the blades on this thing, it's going to be pretty heavy. Second is handling. This weapon basically can't be used one-handed to any significant effectiveness. Third is slot accessibility. Simply put, having too many blades on a weapon limits it to backpack or tool hook slots, so it can't be put on your hip. For many, this isn't too bad of an issue, but it's still worth mentioning. Last is the Phantom Guard. This is more of a potential weakness than a significant problem, but basically if you haven't completed a bunch of trials and or haven't gotten a bunch of heart flowers, the self-damage will kill you. So, how does one use this weapon? Well, I'd personally suggest holding it at the furthest point on the handle from whatever blade you're swinging with for the maximum reach and easier to control handling. The reach is especially important when trying to use the dagger blade, as it's not very long on its own. Also, don't use the Phantom Guarded Greatsword unless your target is tough enough to warrant it. For most low-tier enemies, plain Turribatas, Oak Goteras, Standard Worms, and any Spriggles, the dagger will do enough damage to dispatch them relatively quickly. It's not until you get high-tier enemies that you really need the Greatsword blade. Additionally, if you're being ganked and are on low health, hitting yourself with the damage over time is generally a bad idea. Even if its associated damage buff will dispatch the crowd far easier. That all being said, there is a strategy to negate the Phantom Guard's effects. If you use Ground Slam near the feet of an enemy without actually hitting them with the blade, you deal the damage of the non-Phantom Guarded version of the blade, and you don't take the self-damage over time. Now, how would I improve this design? Well, the easiest improvement is to remove all of the decorative blades, as well as the connector that holds them on. You get basically no combat potential out of having them there, and they make the weight and handling worse. If you're determined to keep them, however, I'd suggest moving them to the dagger side, and putting Wakazashis on the ones facing the same direction as the dagger. Another easy improvement is to swap the wide dagger out for a short sword. Other than the slight bit of weight and material cost difference, the short sword is a straight upgrade. Lastly, metal choice is extremely important for this weapon. As I already said, Mithril blades are a great choice. For the guard on the short sword, it's up to you whether you'd use Mithril for weight or Palladium for durability. I would personally use Palladium because there wouldn't be any other durability increasing pieces on the weapon, and because Phantom Guards are technically copper. So here's my revised version of the design. Unfortunately, the silhouette is no longer as unique as the original, but for practicality, using this with the fighting style tips I gave earlier should produce the best result. Thanks for the submission. With that done, we can move on to the Trident. The main strengths of this weapon are its range possibility, because it can be put on the long metal handle, its decent damage, and its easy ability to cut food, given the blade choice. The Trident has very few weaknesses as well, with the only one being the redundancy of all the blades. That said, they're pretty light individually, so it's fine as long as you're not using Valiant or Gold for all 3 blades. For the best fighting style, I would say you should probably use this as a slashing weapon, given the blade choice. The long handle allows you to stay outside of the melee range of most enemies, and can completely shut down most Terabatas with the right movement. As for upgrades and improvements, it really depends on how you intend to use the weapon. For thrusting, I'd replace the center dagger with a rapier blade, turning it into a lance of sorts, and I'd swap out the other two daggers for straight daggers or sais, as they're both decent for thrusts. For slashing, I'd replace the side daggers with wakizashis, and the center blade with either a long sword blade, if you're using the medium handle, or a short sword blade if you're using the long handle. And for keeping the looks intact, while making it overall better, I'd just replace the center blade with a short sword blade, and leave the rest the same. So here are my revised tridents. I consider this to be an overall improvement on all fronts, but this weapon was already pretty good before I made any changes to it. Thanks for the submission. Here's another one that I still don't know what to call. Overall, I think this is a pretty versatile weapon with good slashing and thrusting capabilities and decent range. It doesn't have anything in particular that stands out too much, but given its general usefulness, I think that's fine. When it comes to weaknesses, I'm struggling to find anything besides just minor nitpicks. The biggest real problem is the difficulty to obtain, but that's not anywhere near as bad as some of the others. The only other potential problem is its weight, but as with the previous two, that's mostly down to material choice. For your fighting style, this is one of very few weapons that is equally good for thrusts as it is for slashes, so no matter how you like to fight, this weapon will suit you pretty well. Also, it outranges most common swords because of the handle, so if you do decide to engage in PvP with it, you can use that to your advantage. Given the low quantity of flaws, the only changes I would really make are purely cosmetic ones, specifically replacing the curved daggers with long curved bar blades, to have it have a more pleasing silhouette and just generally be better at guarding against attacks. Besides that, this is a weapon I can't really improve upon without changing the fundamental concept of it. So, there you go. I wouldn't call it a perfect weapon, as a specialized weapon is almost always better in this game than a generalized one, but it's still pretty damn good. Thanks for the submission. Here we go again. The Death Umbrella, or so it's called. This thing has very few strengths, but it's basically a joke weapon, so I'll give it a free pass there. Its main strength is its reach potential, as it can technically be put on the long metal handle, but that's about it. I guess it could also be used to fight against shields, but that's a pretty niche use case. For weaknesses, I mean, it's a joke weapon. Basically everything about it is a weakness. It's unnecessarily heavy from having 4 wakizashi blades. It's unnecessarily hard to get because you only get 3 per mold, so you need 2 molds. And, I mean, the blades aren't even aligned correctly to be used like a normal weapon. You either have to use it in a pulling motion, which is not effective, or a downward thrusting motion like a pickaxe, which is also not effective. So, given all those problems, how would I improve it? Well, short of replacing the wakizashis with axes and completely changing the overall concept of the weapon, as much as I hate to admit it, this is basically the most optimized this weapon can get. Of all of the blades that are not axes that can be put on a 4-way connector, the wakizashis are the highest damage, theoretically. So, there you go. I know I was pretty hard on the Death Umbrella, but I do think it's a fun concept. It just also happens to be moderately inept as a weapon. Still, thanks for the submission. Alright, finishing strong here. The Scythe Axe is not only a pretty cool looking weapon, but one with a decent number of strengths. Firstly, it has pretty good damage. Secondly, it has fantastic range, given the handle choice. Thirdly, it has 2 different types of tool use. The axe can obviously be used to chop trees, but the scythe can actually be used to harvest dried grass to get double the amount of clumps out of it. Its main weakness is handling and mobility. It's a long handle with a decent bit of stuff at the end, so you can't swing it around the same way you could a dagger or whatever. So, how do you use the scythe axe? Well, it's surprisingly similar to the trident. The long range combined with the decent damage allows you to stay out of melee range of most enemies, and it completely shuts down smaller Turabatas with the right movement. So, stay out of range and hit with either the tip of the scythe or the right part of the axe. With all that said, how would I improve it? Well, looks-wise, I don't think I can. In terms of just raw damage output, however, replacing the L-axe with a curved axe would significantly increase potential damage output, albeit at the cost of having a smaller striking surface on the axe head. And there it is, all 5 weapons done for this video. Thank you to everyone who submitted a weapon already. I'm looking forward to getting to the new submissions in a few episodes. Also, again, if you have a weapon that you want me to review in one of those future episodes of Weapon Review, the link to submit that is in the description. But, with all that said, I'll see you around.